I think barbells are the most overrated and overused implements out there.
The fatal flaw in Eugene's video can be summed up in this one sentence.
Especially as you start to get stronger and spend more time in the gym.
Thus, the title here is really just inflammatory clickbait, designed to generate a large number of views, as far as I see it. And it worked, man. Here we are. I'm talking about it, as have many others. If it was titled, "Why I Stopped Doing Barbell Exercises," hard stop, fine, cool, man. I probably wouldn't be here right now making this video. But he had to throw in that, "and you should too" part. And here's what I'm going to say to preface this, because I was actually having a relatively similar conversation with somebody on Instagram the other day, right? I used to be a barbell purist, a straight bar purist, right? The barbell is the tool. It's the one, it's the only, it's the end all be all. I was basically 40 years away from being the next Mark Rippetoe, but somewhere along the way, my viewpoints and my opinions, they shifted dramatically, pretty dramatically, right? And now I'm a huge proponent of many other modalities. Calisthenics stuff, specialty bars, you guys see all of them in my gym, dumbbells, weight vests, cables, bands, all that stuff. I use all of those tools and more. And like I said, you can see all of it in my own training, and it's much the same deal with many of my clients and the programs that I write for them as well. I certainly utilize the barbell, you guys all see that, and I highly respect it for its value and the benefits that it confers, but I am by no means beholden to it. And that makes me a pretty good candidate for reviewing this piece of advice, I think.
Now, joint strain isn't a bad thing. The human body is not fragile, it's incredibly resilient, and has the ability to recover and come back stronger from the stress we expose it to. The problem is, as you start accumulating more reps, sets, and time spent training, you'll inevitably have to wind up using heavier weights and more volume in the gym just to make small marginal gains.
This is all accurate as far as I'm concerned. He basically just described the principle of diminishing returns, right? Whereby as you gain proficiency, you must consistently make larger and larger investments in order to yield progressively smaller and smaller returns, until eventually the size of the investment that must be made is simply not worth the return that it would provide. And that can be for a bunch of different reasons, right? Maybe you just don't care to do the work required anymore for such a minimal gain at that point. Maybe your body is too beat up for you to even put that work in. Maybe you're on the wrong side of the age curve by then, and so recovery isn't as good as it used to be. Maybe you have other life obligations at that point that simply take priority, etc., etc.
At that point, where the level of joint stress starts to overtake your recovery threshold, that's where you may start to experience all sorts of issues such as extra tightness and restrictions, and potentially pain and injury. Everybody is different, so it's not a blanket rule that doing barbells are going to give you these issues. But from my experiences and conversations with much more experienced lifters and coaches, it's something they all tend to agree on. If you can switch out a barbell exercise for something else that will give you the same, if not more benefits, whilst preserving your joints, it's probably a good idea to do that.
The problem I have with it, though, is the blanket statement here, right? In the title. And you should too. But based on what, man? Why should I give up barbell lifts? Are we talking strictly from a hypertrophy standpoint? Because I'm definitely not going to say that athletes should stop using barbells. I'm definitely not going to say that powerlifters or crossfitters or strongmen should stop using barbells. I'm definitely not even going to say that gen pop people who simply want to maximize their fitness and their health and their longevity should stop using barbells. So who exactly, specifically, explicitly are we talking about here? Is it just bodybuilders and people who care solely about muscular hypertrophy? Because in reality, that's actually a pretty small segment of the people who go to the gym. And even then, even if that is the population we want to isolate, I would still say that this advice is not going to hold true. Eugene himself, he has a solid base, right? A base of strength and muscle. We can see that. But how did he build that base? Did he build it with dumbbell bench presses and unilateral work and cables and bands?
I love to do squat, bench, and dead. Maybe because I grew up on these exercises.
Or did he build it primarily with compound barbell exercises? And now that it is already built, he can kind of bend the rules and just do what he wants to do.
Take one of the most popular exercises, the barbell bench press. This forces your arm into this wider, more flared out position, and it makes it more difficult to tuck your elbows into a stronger, more stable position where your muscles like your chest are in a better position to work. You still can tuck your elbows in, but since your hands are stuck on this straight line out here, tucking your elbows starts to put more rotational forces through your shoulders, elbows, and wrists, which creates more joint strain.
If you are doing a lot of barbell work and you're experiencing chronic joint stress because of it, maybe your program kind of sucks, man. Maybe you just aren't programming things correctly or properly. Maybe your body is too stiff, too immobile. Maybe your training volume is too high. Maybe you aren't modulating the intensities properly. Maybe you don't sleep enough. Maybe your diet is trash and you don't get adequate nutrition to fuel the system and fuel the recovery well enough. Maybe you don't keep yourself adequately hydrated. There are a million other variables at play here besides the fact that you did a lift where your hands were on a fixed implement and you couldn't get the exact degree of elbow tuck that you really wanted.
While the total weight on the bar may be different, the actual stress you're putting on your muscles will be about the same.
These guys love talking about tension on the muscles, right? The muscles can't tell the difference. Tension is tension and blah, blah, blah. And sure, yes, that is true. Tension is tension. But how do we build more muscle in the long run? Well, what's the process to actually go about doing that? Well, you can increase the total training volume, right? I've done that myself in recent history, actually, and I've built a good bit of muscle because of it. But that can only work up to a certain point, right? Eventually, you run out of time, you run out of energy. You can only do so much work. You can't increase volume indefinitely forever. So what else can we do to build muscle, especially in the earlier phases of training? We can increase the amount of tension that is on the muscles, the intensity of the tension, not the volume of the tension. And how do we do that? We do that by gradually handling heavier and heavier weights, right? We get stronger. And so the problem with Eugene's advice here is that you're only going to be able to get so strong absent the barbell. Absent the barbell, your ceiling will be severely, severely capped, right? Try something like this for yourself. Do nothing but dumbbell bench presses, add some machine presses in if you want to for a few months, and watch how quickly that your dumbbell bench press strength stagnates, right? You're gonna get to somewhere and you are gonna hit a freaking wall, man, and there's not gonna be anything that you're gonna do that is gonna push you past that wall. Now, when that happens, try adding in a proper dose of barbell bench pressing. And I guarantee you that at that point, the dumbbell bench press will actually shoot through the roof again. And then when that happens, now you'll be able to use heavier dumbbells for the same workload, the same training volume as you were before. And so now you can create more tension at equivalent volumes and grow more muscle. Because these goals are symbiotic, man. Hypertrophy supports strength and strength supports hypertrophy. They're complementary. And the barbell simply provides us with the optimal balance between loading and stabilizing, right? Dumbbell work emphasizes stability at the expense of the prime movers, the muscles that we really want to grow. And this creates a hard cap on strength gains. Machine work, on the other hand, emphasizes the prime movers at the expense of these stabilizers. And this, on the opposite end of the spectrum, also creates a hard cap because the body won't let you produce force that it cannot stabilize. Look at what happened to Ryan Crowley. That is in large part due to an overemphasis on machine work. He's able to bypass some of these rules because he is enhanced, but the point still stands. His body, because he was enhanced, let him produce more force than he could stabilize, and boom, there goes the tendon. That won't happen to you if you're natural, but you just won't be able to build that strength in the first place. Now, the barbell, on the other hand, it gives us a middle ground here in between these two things. It allows us to create optimal systemic stress that maximizes progress in the long run because it creates an optimal balance between all of these factors. Now, to be sure, you should incorporate these other implements as well. There's nothing wrong with machine work. There's nothing wrong with dumbbell work. It kind of depends on your goals, but still, because like I said, all of these things are symbiotic, they're all pieces of the same puzzle. However, the barbell is the biggest piece of that puzzle, no matter how you slice it. And removing that piece from the equation altogether is simply going to leave you with a big glaring hole.
While the total weight on the bar may be different, the actual stress you're putting on your muscles will be about the same, because you're able to direct that weight more efficiently and effectively right where you want it without having to worry about your joints being in these awkward, uncomfortable positions.
Now, I'm not a fan of this type of terminology in general, right? I don't find there to be anything awkward about lifting stable implements, straight bars or otherwise. Now, this is the same guy who made this exact Instagram post about using machines to let us push our leg work harder and build bigger legs. And while this advice here in this post isn't really the way that I personally would recommend going about building big legs, I'm also not going to argue against it offering an effective contribution towards that goal, right? My problem with it, though, is that this is the same guy who's first saying here that we should use these awkward, fixed plane machines as a better tool for building big legs, and now, just a short while later, he's using the exact same logic to argue that we should not be using barbell. So he's really just contradicting himself here. We shouldn't use barbells because they're awkward and lock you into fixed positions, but machines are better for building big legs because they remove the stabilizers by locking you into rigid and fixed positions. I mean, come on, man. Machines are way more restrictive than barbells. So if that is your reasoning for saying that we should toss out barbell work, by that same logic, we also have to toss out machine work. But you haven't done that. I ran through your stuff and I saw you talk about usage of machines many times, right? You don't reach that conclusion, and so the logic simply doesn't jive. Personally, I have never felt more awkward and uncomfortable in the weight room than when using certain machines, right? Especially leg machines, right? I've had my share of hip issues in the past, and leg machines are far more uncomfortable on my hips than any kind of free squat variation at all. So personally, I would much rather push a set of goblet squats or belt squats to the absolute brink in order to torch my quads than I would to do the same thing with a set of leg presses or hack squats. And your mileage may vary, but the point is that it goes both ways. So if you're gonna apply the logic, then apply the logic. Otherwise, you're just making an invalid argument.
For lower body, I much prefer to use unilateral exercises, dumbbell exercises, machine exercises, and specialty bars like the trap bar, as they allow you to generate much more force through your body and direct it towards your goals, and they're all a lot more customizable to each person's unique structure.
I think it's also important to note here that there are more barbell variations than just a squat, bench press, and deadlift, right? I'm kind of getting the impression as I watch this video here that he really should have titled it "Why I Stopped Doing Squats, Bench Presses, and Deadlifts with a Barbell," rather than "Why I Stopped Using Barbells," right? He kind of alludes to this concept several times, that he's really referring to the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. He never says it outright, but the only problematic lifts that he cites in the video are the traditional squat, bench, and deadlift. But there are a million other permutations that you can create with a straight barbell, derivations of and around these lifts, like I said, using that straight bar, that can accommodate many different bodily structures. And so this is just something that I want you guys to bear in mind as you watch the rest of my video as well as his video if you decide to check it out.
The biggest principle we have to keep in mind for any of this is with any goal, strength, muscle building, athletic performance, or mobility, the only thing we really care about is exposing your body to stress. It doesn't matter if that stress is in the form of a barbell, dumbbell, cable, machine, or body weight, your body will receive it as stress. That stress can be targeted to where you want it to give you the best result possible, or it can be targeted less appropriately to the one spot and give you a whole bunch of other stuff as well.
Now, this is kind of a silly sentiment here, as barbell movements actually do the exact opposite thing that he says here. They don't concentrate stress, rather they spread it across the most muscle groups and therefore the most joints possible for a given movement pattern. This is literally the reason why they are so ideal for creating systemic stress that pushes the body into adaptation. And to reiterate my point from earlier, he is correct on his point about stress being what directs adaptations, right? But if you avoid barbells, especially early on in your training career, you simply cannot create the intensity of stress required to force the body to continually adapt. Point blank, dude, your nervous system is simply incapable of producing the level of force that's required to make the most of these other modalities absent any experience with barbell training. It's too green, man, and it needs that kickstart, that jolt that is most optimally and efficiently provided by barbell training. Thus, the ironic part here is that you'll never get to this point of not needing the barbell if you never train with the barbell in the first place. How can you graduate from a tool that you've never mastered? How can you walk if you don't know how to crawl? If you train with the barbell and you build a base, then by all means, dump it. Stop using it if you're sick of using it. But a beginner will never get to that point where this is a potentially feasible or applicable concept if they skip that base building phase altogether.
But even still, many of the top elite level powerlifters I've worked with will agree that there is a cost to barbell training, and they do as much as they can feasibly to balance out through intelligent programming and the utilization of accessory exercises.
Now here, he's just kind of disproving his own point, in my opinion. You probably aren't a top powerlifter. That's not a knock. It's just the truth. You probably aren't. And if you're watching Eugene's channel, you probably aren't even an advanced or intermediate level gym goer or fitness enthusiast because he has almost 500,000 subscribers. It's just a numbers game at that point. You probably don't fit into the category of who this advice would be applicable to. So why would you be utilizing these concepts that are designed that would only really be beneficial for advanced level athletes? Why would you be trying to run when you haven't learned how to crawl? It's like I said in the beginning, he dismantles his own argument before he even starts the video.
I think barbells are the most overrated and overused implements out there, especially as you start to get stronger and spend more time in the gym.
Unless you're already an advanced athlete, then you should probably be ignoring advice like this altogether. And even if you are advanced, I really still don't agree with much of what he's concluded in his video. I think that if these exercises are so problematic for you, then you're really probably not training very well. You're probably not training very intelligently, and you're not eating your metaphorical vegetables, so to speak. But when you are advanced, it's like I said, you can really do whatever the hell you want, man. You can bend the rules however you see fit because you already know all of the rules. You've already mastered all of the basics, and you've probably already figured out how to do all of this in the most optimal fashion for your own body. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be advanced to begin with. I just find it humorous that all these guys seem to forget where they came from, right? They forget the path that they walked down to get where they are, and they act as if what they're doing today is the reason why they were successful, while ignoring what went on for the 10 years that came before it.
I love to do squat, bench, and dead. Maybe because I grew up on these exercises.
Eugene stopped doing barbell work because he decided it was no longer optimal for him to continue to make good progress with. Now, should you stop doing that too? It really depends on what your goals are and what stage of your training career that you are in. If you've not yet built up a substantial base of strength and muscle, then I can promise you, you're going to dramatically shortchange your long-term progress by following this kind of advice. That just is what it is. If you're okay with that, then that's your prerogative. But you should understand the trade-offs that you are making if you decide to follow such counterintuitive and really extreme blanket advice such as this. The title really should have been Why I Stopped Doing Barbell Exercises. Hard stop. And I just don't like when somebody ignores the context surrounding their own situation and then uses that as a framework for putting out advice that's going to stifle the long-term progress of the majority of people who hear that message and actually end up taking it to heart. Anyway, that's all I got for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and more importantly, I hope that you found it informative and you were able to learn something useful, take something useful away from it. Be sure to check out EnkiriEliteFitness.com for online coaching and training programs. Sign up for my Patreon. Remember to smash the like button before you go. Leave me some love in the comments down below as well. Keep training hard, and I will catch you guys next time.